Thanks.
Thanks, buddy. Good evening. Welcome back to another edition of the Beyond the Backstage Pass. I am your host, Vince Edwards. You may know me from Sound Image Productions. I've also got a couple closed roadie groups on Facebook, one called Death by Loadout and another one called The Backstage Pass. Come check us out. This evening, we have a special show tonight. Most of you know, you were in the game if you're watching this show, most likely. We're busy. Lots of people out gigging and doing, and you know, there's all kinds of gear shortages and labor shortages and just almost too much rock. But we're doing it. So my crews are out, spread around. I think Kyle's out with Brian Wilson right now. Where the hell is Bernie Broderick is off doing his thing for Truth and Audio. I'm going to give you a heads up real quick. I have caught a case of the COVID, so my head is a little spun, and I'm not at my normal, but I'm going to try to give you the best show I can. We've got an amazing guest. I wanted to, before we get to that, talk about No the Beard Tanner is in Oakland touring right now with his boys. They've got some international group they're doing. They were going to stop by. We had to wave them off because of the COVID in the building. Right now, the closest person to me is about 50 feet away just to stay safe. I want to say we're on 2 years without having that come up in our world, and we thought we were doing pretty good. So I guess we got away with it as long as we could. I wanted to do a quick shout out. I don't know if you guys know who Ruth Bussey is, but she's a famous comedian from a show that used to be on in the 60s and on through the 70s, through Love Affair and Laugh In and all kinds of stuff. She's a good friend of the company and other friends of ours, Jan and Muffy from Jan and L Cases, and she's having a health scare right now, so we want to wish her the very best. Also, a quick shout out to the good people at Slow Fiber. That's the one, my one and only true love. They're doing good things over there. They've helped supply the show with masks early on during the COVID thing and all kinds of stuff. All your notion sewings and things, check them out. As it relates to last week's guest, we had the wonderful Eddie Kaipo. Now, you just can't get better than Eddie Kaipo, one of the best mix engineers in the world. He's an absolutely incredible guy and a brother to us. He let us pop in one of his episodes from the Wayback Machine. And we wanted to thank Eddie for that. Might as well just get right to it, guys, because we're on the fast track here. And I've been yelled at to remember to tell you guys, if you're watching this thing and we're doing okay, press like and subscribe. It helps with the algorithm. All right, that was the fastest I've got through the early housework of doing the show. You know, we've been very busy around here, and we're always trying to bring this show together for you guys. It's a lot of fun for us, but it is a lot of work, so we appreciate you guys bearing with the technical challenges and the nature of the schedule moving around a little bit. You know, we get to it when we can. If there's pain shows that reach in and push out in front, they always go first, obviously. That's just the order of march, the way things have to be, but we do appreciate you guys tuning in. We know there's 1,000 places you can be. Might as well get right to it. I've got a really amazing guest. His career is fascinating to me. It's an LD, and you know I'm always trying to get in the heads of LDs and see what inspires them, how they come to what they become and what they do. He's worked for everybody from Dead Can Dance. I think he just did a show recently with the Cult up at Pier 17. He's largely known as being the lighting designer for, gosh, a couple solid decades with the infamous, the amazing, the one of a kind band, Black Francis's the Pixies. He's a single father and a hardworking man from the East Coast. Help me welcome this evening the one and only Myles Mangino. Myles, how are you this evening, sir?
Vince, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Oh, it's such a treat, really, Muddy. I know it's been a little hit and miss on the technology, and you've been very busy, and trying to get a hold of you has been tricky. I appreciate you coming on the show. It's very, very cool. You know, I'm not joking around. I'm often curious about, you know, how we chose our lanes in life. You know, I have a bunch of pyro friends. I always just figured they're just, you know, pyromaniacs. You know, just that's how they got into the pyro.
Yeah, it's fun.
You know, they just like playing with fire. They think it dances or something.
Want to burn shit and blow shit up.
Yeah, exactly. You know, just stuck in adolescence or something. But you know, the audio guys, how they get to that road. How did you become the lighting man that you are? Why lighting?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I started out as a guitar player and singer songwriter, and just gravitated toward the technical side, and then I don't know. I think the lighting part of it was a more creative, was a more artistic thing, and I think there was just sort of a need too. There was like, say, hey, who's going to do the lighting? Who's got some gear? And started out, and then just kept building on it. And I think the more I built on it, the more I liked it, the more I enjoyed it, and you know.
And you followed it into a kind of a career path.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. How long have you been doing in the lighting game?
36 years.
Oh, that is
I think.
impressive. That really is impressive. That's an incredible amount
Yeah,
of time.
right out of high school. You know, I had my own bands. Even in high school, I was building my own synthesizers and guitars, and so I think I was more. Even though I thought I was going to be a guitar player and a musician, I was always like leaning into the technical side of things.
Right. Now you have the brain for that. I mentioned that you worked with, for me, a really seminal band in music, one that's really been just incredible through pretty much all of its incarnation. What year did you get with the Pixies?
I got with the Pixies in 1986. I was only 2 years old. No, I moved to. I got out of high school. I got out of high school up to Boston. You know, the Boston music scene at the time was really happening, and I went up there to try to make it in the music business. I actually started out as a audio guy, and was he had my little effects rack, compressor rack. I was hopping on the T, taking the subway from stop to stop, mixing a bunch of sets, different bands and different little clubs around Boston, and then I met up. I first met up with the Throwing Muses, actually, and I don't know if you knew them, but still one of my favorite bands.
Did you say Throwing
Muses? They were managed by Throwing Muses. Yeah,
sure,
great bands, still going. And so I was a huge fan of them. Would go to see them at the Rathskeller in Boston, which was sort of the CBGBs of Boston at the time.
Right.
And they were. I was doing a show with another band at the Living Room in Providence, Rhode Island, and we were the opening act. And I saw the Throwing Muses was like one of my favorite bands, and I was totally in love with these like punk rock girls, and I saw them like loading their own gear in. And so I went up to him like, hey, you need a hand like getting your gear on stage and setting it up. And they're like, yeah, sure. And I'm like, do you have a sound engineer? And they're like, no. And I'm like, hey, I'll mix your show for free. And they just like, free. And their manager was there, was like, free, because I was mixing in the opener. And so I did the opener, which was Miracle Legion, another great band, and still great friends of mine, 30 years later.
Yeah.
And so then I mixed the Throwing Muses, and their manager was there, and he was like, "Wow, we're going on a tour tomorrow. You want to come along with us?"
No kidding.
Just like that. Wow. I don't know what I was, like 18, 19 years old. And it's like, a tour. Yes, this is what I've been waiting for. And I had a truck. I had this old Jartran truck that I bought from the company Jartran when they went out of business. You remember them? They're like the predecessor to Ryder, U-Haul.
Yeah.
And I had this old beat up truck. And so I said, you know what? I'll carry their gear too. And they're like, great. The man was like, great, And so I went to Newport, Rhode Island. I went to pick their gear up. And when I was headed there, I got a phone call from the manager, and he said, there's the opening act, and it needs a ride. They need a ride down to New York. Can you pick them up? They're up in Boston. And I said, yeah, sure, I'll pick them up. And then who was the opening act? It was the Pixies. So I drove up to Boston, and I saw the four Pixies were sitting on a street corner by a stop sign with a bench seat to a car. They had taken out the bench seat. They found it in like a junkyard, and they were all sitting on this like all their little amps behind them. And I pulled up. They threw the bench seat into the back of my truck. and it was in the middle of the winter. It was like January in New England, freezing cold. They were all back there chain smoking. There was no lights. It was dark. It was freezing cold. And I drove them down to New York City. And every time like I took a corner, I could hear the gear go slide across. And I was like, oh, shit, I killed the Pixies. and at the time, you know, there was before they really had a record out, before anyone knew who they were, and we went down to New York City and we played the Ritz, the old Ritz, and man, when they came on stage, the place just exploded. It just blew up, and people knew the words to all their songs, and you know, before they had anything out, and it was all done. People knew who they were, and they knew their music through like the tape trading, you know, all the cassette tape trading that we did back then. And exactly. I don't know if a lot of people today don't understand about tape trading, but that was a big part of like the punk underground.
Oh yeah, that was a huge way music got around. I mean, I remember that even going as far as into the early metal days, because I think that's the first way I heard the first Slayer was, you know, the same channel that, you know, DRI or like you say, Pixies, stuff like that would come through. When do you think, did you notice, I mean, I know that always had a regional effect, you know, initially, and it seemed to me college presence, you know, they were really well understood in college, and that seemed like that pipeline worked. When did you see, was it Surfer Rosa, or was it as far away as Planet of Sound, or when did you see like the Pixies really get the steam under them?
So they had their first EP and their first album, Surfer Rosa, come on Pilgrim, and so like I said, I did that in '86. I did that little tour with them, and they opened for them just for a few shows, and then I continued on with the Throwing Muses across the country, in like, you know, my little broken down truck in a van, and carrying our own gear, sleeping in the back of the truck, and, you know, sharing one hotel room for 6 people. And then we got to the end of this, and the manager of the Pixies said, hey, we're going to, like, first he's telling me, you want to go on tour, and then like a month later he's like, hey, you want to go to England? I'm like, go to England? Yeah. And so the Pixies had like 2 weeks worth of shows booked in England, and they blew up immediately. They were an act that, like, they had hardly done anything, and we flew over, got off the you know, went through customs at Heathrow, came out of customs, and there was 100 kids there with signs. You know, it was like,
wow.
You know, it was like Beatles came to town, and they're like, what is going on here? You know, we haven't done anything yet. So they were someone that, you know, a few months later we were playing like at lunchtime in the cafeteria at MIT for like free pizzas, and next thing we know, there's like people holding up signs at Heathrow, and so that kind of like 2-week run around England, they just kept extending it. We started going into Europe, going into the Eastern Bloc, and going down into the Baltics, and all these little tiny little punk rock underground clubs. And so that 2 weeks actually turned into about 10 months on the road.
Wow, that is impressive.
Yeah. Remember the splitters they had in England? Oh, yeah. They used to call it a splitter.
Yeah.
Bands where they had that like wall, put the gear behind it and sit in the.
Yeah.
One of those, yeah.
Now you came up in the honest days of rock and roll, baby. That is funny. Who was the?
Oh yeah.
How did you interact with the band? Was this something you dealt with firsthand with Black Francis, and how did you address each other back then? Did you like to be called Black Francis, Frank Black, or did you deal with Kim, or how does that work? Is it through you know, band management? How did you decide what kind of lighting effects you were going to come with? You just brought it yourself?
Yeah, initially, you know, you're using what you got, and just kind of be creative and experiment with it. And I always try to get my inspiration from the music, and particularly from the artwork. You know, like their artwork was very underground, and lots of like bloody animals and taxidermy, and you know, kind of dark images and stuff like that. So I sort of got the inspiration of using lights and from artwork, and I still do that today. You know, I think of, besides the music, is what is the vibe and what is the look of the band. You know.
Sure. Did they give you all the freedom you needed to be creative and express yourself?
Oh yeah, that was one of the great things about working for them, is they essentially didn't have much input. I mean, they were a group that if they had it their way, they would play in complete darkness, facing their back to the audience.
Yeah, door
He just
style.
wanted to play their instrument. They just wanted to play, and that was it. They wanted to wear the clothes they woke up in. They weren't anything about show business. They just wanted to play good songs, and so yeah, I would even later on when I would come up with like real specific scenic designs and design for a tour. It was always interesting because I would look at all the venues we were going into and see what would fit, see how much truck. Yeah, what's what starts out a design idea often that people don't realize is how much truck space do you have.
Yeah, right. That's right. How much real estate
That's
can you afford?
foundation. That's the foundation of your design. You go like, okay, you got 3 trucks, or you got 3/4 of one truck. That's how you start. Okay, what can I fit into that truck space?
Right,
That's or you have a trailer, or you have 15 trucks.
right, right.
That's the foundation of a design. And so I would, even in the later years, in more recent times, I would be told how much truck space I have, how much budget I have. I would look at the venues, see what would fit, what would work, because sometimes you're in a place that's holds 50,000 people, and the next day you're in a place that holds 2,500 people, and
Right.
so their shows were up and down like that. So I tried to do something where, if we're going to go on tour for a year through an album cycle, that we have a show that there's a look to the show that looks consistent through all those different types of venues. If you're in one of the academies in England, or if you're in a stadium in Brazil, that you have this a similar kind of look to it. And so I would spend months like listening to things and looking at drawings and looking at little models and 3D drawings and programming and designing and building things, and I'd get all this done, and like just the band would show up at the first gig or the first day of rehearsals, and they'd be like, "Oh, we're curious to see what you've done this time, Myles." And like, so completely free to do whatever I want. No real input from them at all. I mean, I knew what they liked and what they didn't like and stuff like that. But I really, it was a real. I mean, I like to work collaboratively with people, but it was a real blessing to have a band for so long that just let me do whatever I felt like I was going to do.
Well, yeah, I know it's got to be a blessing as an LD to have that much range and room to move. I know that, with the Pixies, I know they had a couple, like they seemed like they were a tumultuous band. They had a little bit of a tumultuous history with each other, and they would kind of pop off and like break up, it seems like, and then kind of the Pixies are gone forever. And I think they must have had that. I know that I personally did a couple shows that I must have run into you, where I think it was at the Greek here in Oakland, or in Beverly, and where it was like that was it. They were done. They're going away. Then they kind of went away for a minute, and then you guys reformed. What was the kind of the energy behind that? Was the band kind of just say we're kaput, no more, and then they get back? Was it more of that farewell tour kind of marketing thing? What was the deal with the Pixies? It always seemed to be kind of like they were on the verge of quitting at any given point.
Yeah, they had a great run in the 80s, early 90s, and but it got to the point where Frank Black and Kim was focusing more on each of their individual careers, and so that they split up. It was about 9 years where they each did their sort of individual thing, and then I don't know, they started chatting about it and talking about it, but I think everyone really did think they were never getting back together again, and finally they got together, and the funny part of it was they were unsure if anyone cared. They were kind of like, no one's going to remember us, nobody cares, and then they came back and they did Coachella in 2004 and headlined the main stage there, and absolutely blew up, and they were selling 10 times the tickets that they sold before they broke up. So I think it was good music that meant a lot to people, and a certain vibe that people say they grew up with. It was like the music of my youth, and they grew up with it, and the love for them built over that time, you know.
Oh no, they're I don't even know how to explain the Pixies to people that don't know. They they had a weird staying ability. What for you now? I know there's Doolittle and Surferosa. What was your album that you felt you could be able to most creative in the lighting? I personally, I don't know why I'm forgetting the name of this album, but it's one of my favorite Pixies albums. It's the one with the eyeballs on it. It's Planet of Sound on it. Trump Lamont. I always felt that was kind of a biggest departure for them from their earlier sound, but for me, that was the one that really grabbed me. It made sense. It rocked from beginning to end. Great lyrics, great playing. Did you have an album that you preferred, that you found your lighting and your approach works best with?
I tried to do stylistically something that matched the artwork of each album, like Surferosa and Come on Pilgrim. It was always like everything was stark angles and simple, and maybe if I had a big rig, I would only use 10% of the rig, so it's just real simple beams, and it was always sepia tones, like always CTO, and sort of old film look. And then if anything was from Bossa Nova, it was always more like it was red and white kind of tones, and then things from Doolittle was always like a little bit bluer and happier tones. You know, Trump Lamont was often like a cold white, and so I felt like people would the audience would hear something from that record, and then the sort of color scheme of the song and the vibe of the song and the color temperature of the song would match what they remember looking at that album cover, you know. And I always tried to do that with any band I worked with. You sort of, even if nobody notices it but me, somehow subliminally they feel like that the video for that song was very red and dark or something like that. So you want to bring that into the show. So you kind of, what you're used to, the audience is used to seeing, it helps them to reconnect with the music in the same way they've used to been connecting with it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You mentioned that the Pixies band broke into a couple side projects. Of course, that would be Frank Black and I guess it was Frank Black and the Catholics, and of course the Breeders. Did you work with either of these side projects?
Yeah, both of them. Yeah, toured with both of those side projects for a few years after everything kept going, and it was all on a you know, it was kind of a step down. It was a smaller scale. Stuff, and
both really great side projects. I mean, a lot of fun. The Los Angeles album from Frank Black was a kick. That was absolutely a lot of fun, and of course the Cannonball project.
He had a lot of material he put out during that time. He had his Nashville phase, Catholics phase, and
he's very prolific. Very, very prolific, to say the least. Yeah, no doubt. And how was it working with the Dio sisters?
Great. You know, same thing. They were, it was like a real family operation. We would take tour buses into their hometown in Ohio and park them outside of their house, and they would rehearse in their house. And there's this one little suburban street where she lived, and her sister lived, and her brother lived, and her parents lived, and this little kind of residential street. And it was look at a family operation, and
wow,
it was always a good vibe.
Yeah, who knew? You're out of the East Coast, right? You live in New York?
I live in New York, in Manhattan, right in the middle of the city.
Oh, yeah, that's got to be sweet. And maybe it has some of its own challenges. Do you get to work over at Pier 17 quite frequently?
Yeah. You mentioned this earlier on in the show, the Cult. I just went to see the Cult last night, and my good friend Matt Kaminsky was running the lights for that. But yeah, it's right near where I live. It's great. They rebuilt South Street Seaport Pier, and there's a venue up on the rooftop, and one of the best lineups of this summer in New York. You know, Blondie's coming, Devo was there, the Deftones were there. It just says so much. really good. And a good vibe because you're outside in the breeze and you see the city skyline and the Brooklyn Bridge is right behind the stage.
Yeah,
So,
it's kind of
it's
perfect. Yeah, it's very pretty. You opened up Highlight Previs Production Design Studios. Is that a company where you offer your services to pretty much artists around that are available looking for the type of work you do?
yeah. So yeah, Highlight is a studio. We're out in Queens, and it's a great building that we're in. That's a real like production hub, and a few other different like kind of production vendors are in the building. But I have this nice studio. Tried to earlier in my career, I had built a bunch of recording studios and owned different recording studios in different cities. So I built a previous design studio with that same sort of vibe, that it feels like real comfortable, like in that you're in a recording studio, and it's just a place where people can, I work on it myself out of my own projects, but you can rent out Highlight as a previs or a place of work, a place to come and program shows. You can bring consoles in, or work on the 3D CAD design side, render side. Yeah, so it's good having a space to work out of, and that like my fellow lighting designers and production designers have a place in New York City that they can go to. And I was surprised that there wasn't anything like that in a city like New York, and
Really?
but now there is.
Oh, wow, neat.
Yeah,
How did they find you? They look for you under Highlight Previs Production Design?
Yep. Highlight is HIGHLT. So highlight.com.
It is.
Or Highlight PDS. Yeah.
I'll reach out to them there if you're looking for the good Highlight those services. Yeah, I noticed recently you were in the Peabody Library. Now, the Peabody Library is a very specific place in Baltimore, and I'm a huge fan of libraries. I'm a huge fan of old books, reading in general. But what a place, man! And I noticed you were like on the fourth floor.
Dude, have you been in there?
No, I have not, and I'm super jealous of you. That place is insane, buddy.
It was insane, and it's closed. So I did this sort of private event there that I can't really reveal what it was, but yeah, I had like a week in that building, and it's like you're in like one of the great libraries of Europe or something, and it's just incredible. And it's shut down. It's shut down to the public, but it's like 5 stories high, and just like piles, and 300,000 old books are like just piled up in there, and so I spent a lot of time to climb into the upper levels and kind of go through everything, and this just unbelievable catalog of material that it's amazing. It's there. I just felt like, oh my God, I hope someone digitizes all this and preserves it.
Oh no, they'd have to do something like that. I mean, it's like a national treasure. I don't think a lot of people understand that it's there, and just the size of this place. I mean, it's enormous. It's magnificent. It's the most unique building. It's kind of open in the round in the middle, and it's just fascinating. If you guys haven't seen this thing, check out the Peabody Library in Baltimore. What do you think it's off? It's closed. Do you think it's a safety thing? Like it's just not safe?
Yeah, it's unsafe. Yeah, it feels like you couldn't walk through the building I mean, I did because I was working there, but like some of the people that came for this project I was working on, like someone from the library could do a little guided tour and take maybe a half a dozen people at a time up through the different levels.
Yeah.
And I think for safety reasons you could have it open to the public.
Yeah, the amount of weight that those books, it's kind of like what the Pentagon was designed for. A lot of people don't know, but it was designed for after-war storage of IRS files. So that they built the walls extra thick, they built the floors extra thick, because holding that kind of weight, is an extra design quality. Yeah. And so when I was looking at those pictures, I was just just astounded. I mean, absolutely beautiful. And the video you provided, it was really great, dude. Like, I can't say that enough. That is,
Oh, cool.
yeah, that was,
Glad someone notices that.
yeah, that was cool as hell, man. That was like, that's some shit. The whole history of life in there.
Awesome.
I noticed that you worked with Dead Can Dance. I mean, talk about a cult band, a band that really brought it. What was it like working with Dead Can Dance?
Oh, wonderful! I've been with them for a long time, and part of sort of the early part of my career was working with all the 4AD bands, and I was kind of back when I first started out because of my connection with Throwing Muses in the Pixies. I was sort of a U.S. connection to 4AD, so all these sort of really cool underground artists that I loved when they came to the States, I would help them get on the road and get their tours together and stuff like that. So. But Dead Can Dance got back together after a hiatus, just like Pixies did, and been putting on some really wonderful creative shows. And I spent a few years on the road with Lisa Gerard, which is one of the principal singers, and we went out and all the like beautiful opera houses of the world. And yeah, a big, even though all of the crew up until the pandemic, all of the crew that tours with Pixies also tours with Dead Can Dance, same group of people. So it's really nice. It was like a real family that we all moved from one tour to the other.
Wow.
And it was kind of Pixies are in mosh pit, sweaty, slam dance, punk rock venues. And then you would all move over to Dead Can Dance, and it was in all like beautiful sit down opera houses.
Yeah.
Like symphony hall.
Right.
So it was like the same grungy old crew, and but in two completely different environments.
Right.
It felt to us it felt the same tour. It was just like the people on stage switched out. We're doing the same thing we always do. But
Yeah.
But another band that because their music is so interesting and off the wall and ethereal. It was, as a lighting designer, it was a real great like creative opportunity to try to do something that no one has seen before, something really original and unique.
Yeah, no, I imagine that would be a great opportunity to flex your muscles on a show like that, a tour like that. Well, getting into that, what kind of criteria do you use to pick a project or a job? The check clears.
I don't know.
So that's one I use often.
Yeah, I mean, well, you know how it is. You know how it is today. Today, it's just like there's so much coming at us from all directions.
Yeah.
It's I can't even. It's a different world we're in. It used to be, you'd get we would be with two or three different bands, and as they would go on the road, you'd stay with them for a few years, and now it's just like it's just like, what are you doing next week? Can you cover this? Can you do this month? Can you do these 3 weeks? It's like, as you know, it's so much going on. It's a different world we're in.
So how do you decide how you're going to pick a show next? Is it the first come, first serve, or so it's one you can bring the most attention to and most specific kind of style and your kind of cues and production values?
Yeah. If that too is stylistically what I like musically and I feel good about, and it's good people, and something that I can be really creative with. It's the same thing. Sometimes you pick some job and you say, oh, it's not that interesting. But I wasn't doing anything this week, and then all of a sudden something better comes to you, and you're just like, oh my god, I wish I could do that. But it's I always go with who I committed to first. But in the end, I would rather work on something that gave me the most creative freedom, or whether I could do the most interesting and unusual stuff and really push things to the limit. And especially with artists that want to push things to the limit and want to come out with something original and unique and new, I always go for that first.
I noticed in your bio that it says that you've worked with Joe Biden. In what capacity did you work with Joe Biden? I got to know.
Well, oh yeah, that's a good story. So that kept me going at the very beginning of the pandemic, when everything shut down. That was some of my actually my first gigs. You know, when everything shut down in the beginning of 2020, I was there was this a political event producer company from DC. I had done a bunch of big rallies for Hillary also.
Uh-huh.
Sorry, and so when Biden was going out and doing these press conferences, they came back to me, this political event producer, and it's this was really early. This was like March, April or something of 2020, when nobody was going near anybody else, and he was doing press conferences. You know, he lives in Wilmington, Delaware,
Right.
and so he was doing press conferences kind of around that area, and so we were all individually driving. We would pick like some community center, and there would maybe five or six of us. We would drive to some like community center, and there was no vaccine or anything. It was real like social distance. And I was the first time I remember running into like stagehands. And of course, everyone's wearing a mask. And so a stagehand said to me, like, "Hey, can I borrow your C wrench?" And I was like, "Okay." And I like put it on the case and like step back, you know, like this. And
Yeah.
or even like I would put like lights on the floor. I'd put some like lights on the floor and go, "Okay." I step like 20 feet back and go, like, "Okay, can you guys hang those over there?" And it was real, everybody staying apart. But he was doing a press conference each week, and each one was on a different subject. You know, one week it was on climate change, one week was on healthcare, one week was on something, you know,
Yeah.
and it was in a different city. It was real serious about social distancing, and it was just, you know, basically, off camera in each city he would meet up with local people, and you'd maybe sit in some garden, and we kind of light it up for some photos and stuff like that. But he would meet up and sit around with some local people and have them talk and listen to their what's going on and what concerns them in their neighborhood. And real good hearted guy. Just sometimes sat with for hours listening to people speak, and then at the end of this, he would get up, you know, and at the podium, and you know, you have to make sure the American flags were just perfect behind him, and he was all framed out, and it didn't look nice. And then he'd do his little 20 minute speech, of which they would put 20 seconds of it on the news the next day. And we made these little plastic circles. We had these little plastic circles that the press would sit in. So maybe only a dozen people would sit in these 6 foot plastic circles. And even there would be one pool, like a AAP pool camera person, a video person, one pool photo person.
Right.
So yeah, so I worked on those. He was always kind and nice to us, and was someone who came, you know, after the whole thing was over, and thanked all the crew, and would
Yeah.
spend a little time and chat with you from a distance. And so anyways, so I did all those press conferences he did leading up to the election, and then I designed and lit the election night stage for Kamala's stage in Philadelphia.
Yeah,
So yeah,
boy.
real honor to be able to be a part of history, and you know.
Yeah, yeah. As weird as it's been that was a changing of the guard that needed to happen in some kind of bad ways. You know, I know you've toured around. You've been around the planet. I'm always curious what touring folks like yourself do with their spare time during the off days during touring. Did you enjoy the architecture? You go out and chase other.
I did.
Yeah. How did you spend your time when you're off tour? Saying
I did, and so I gotta. Yeah, this is always the one that's fast. So I always try to. I always felt like, hey, we're in Italy, we're in Australia, we're in Japan, and we have a day off. And I would try to, even, you know, you're tired, you're working until 1, 2 in the morning, you're getting up at 9 a.m. But when I had a day off, I felt like this is an opportunity, and I really want to see this place. And but you know, it was easy to like think, oh, I got a hotel. I'm just gonna lay in my room and watch a couple of movies. But I had this tech that came out with me for years, Chris Pedersen, and he was a lot younger than me, and so he always inspired me. He'd be writing me like, "Hey, let's get up. I'm rented a car. It's 8 a.m. Let's go and explore. We're in New Zealand. We gotta go on a hike. And so he really inspired me to get outwards. I know a lot of the crews that tour would, especially ones I work with, would be like, you had a day off in some city and they would just find the closest Irish pub or the closest bar to
Sure.
the hotel bar, and they would just sit in the hotel bar for 12 hours and drink. And maybe people needed that for their life, but I tried to take it all. I really tried to take it all in. There's a certain phenomenon that too, I think, that happens with people who tour, and that, don't you always feel like, I'll always come back here?
Yeah.
You're in Paris and you go, I'm always going to come back here.
Yeah.
You're in Sydney or you're in Cape Town in South Africa. You're like, I'll always be back here. But like, I think people don't tour when they go to some place on holiday. They say, I'll probably never come back here.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's how the rest of the world thinks.
Yeah, that's a good
And
point.
so they say, I'm never going to come back here. So I want to get in as much as I can. I want to see everything I can possibly come in. But the touring life really does give you that kind of attitude. Like, I'm in this town. I could go to this museum. I could go to this park. But yeah, I'll be back here again.
Well, like you said, and oftentimes you're whooped, you're tired, you might be still getting used to the local food and the water and some of the stomach upset that can go with touring. But I know I found that it was incumbent upon us to, get out there and see the sights, see what's available. Some of these places that touring.
I think I did that. I did that a lot. That a lot, even though maybe sometimes I just had to sit in the hotel room and work. But yeah, we're tired, we're exhausted, we're wasted. But get out there and see it.
Yeah. I mean,
you might never come back.
Yeah, it sounds like you've used your time well. I noticed you worked with Mark Ronson and Lucky Day on a project called Sinking Sounds. What was that all about?
Oh yeah, that was good. That was a really fun thing. It was just a single they had produced and worked on together, and it was a video shoot, and we were in a soundstage in Greenpoint, and filmed the video and a little short film about it. And I was really proud of that one. It came out good. And then we did a record release project for it, and so they played a little private concert and kind of I loved how that looked. It was just kind of another sort of COVID project where they were performing in a gigantic warehouse in Brooklyn, but yet they were just in the middle of a big empty space with the band. So I tried to build all these little towers around them, and it was a full 360-degree film shoot. So I don't know, it felt like it was a big vast space, but since there was no audience there, I tried to design a show that brought it in, and so it felt big and intimate at the same time.
Yeah, I saw the complete work, and it looks like you were able to accomplish that look very much with your lighting. It was really cool. It's a great image.
Did you see the video part of it? They saw the video of it too?
Yeah, it was pretty great.
Yeah, Alex.
I noticed that you spend a lot of time with your daughter. It seems to me like you prioritize the being a father, and I know that being a touring guy that can be tricky. Tell us about being a single dad and a touring guy. How do you make that and manage that and make that work?
Well, since I'm here in a little beach vacation house because I'm on a sort of beach holiday this week with my daughter, and but since she's gotten a little bit older, I quit doing the longer tours. I'm not going out on the road for 5 months at a time anymore. I just can't imagine being away from her that long. I mean, I miss 1 weekend, and she gets really mad at me, now that she's 6. So I'm spending more time doing the design work and doing the program work and sending other people out who are younger than me to go and do the long tours on the road, which is kind of a natural evolution of our careers. But yeah, so and there's so much good work in New York City now, that I can do regional stuff and be able to spend good time with her. Um, so yeah, so I don't do I mean, before she was born, it was like this tour ended in this city, and I went to this city and started this tour, and you could be out on the road for 10 months or something. And
Right. It was
so
incumbent upon yourself to book up as much as you could. And
yeah,
now you're
yeah.
a different approach being a
So
papa. I guess, yeah, being away for 5 or 6 months, it'd be a lot you'd miss. And so you've made that adjustment in
yeah,
the way you approach the business and to be more present in your daughter's life.
yeah,
That's got to be a big
yeah.
plus.
That's a priority. You know what I mean? There's missing those moments. You're always going to regret it.
Yeah,
I mean, there's a lot of people that do have families that are out on the road, and especially if you're doing like the big arena tours that are going out for 18 months at a time. And I mean, I even know some moms that are out on the road where the dad is back at home with the kids and for months and months at a time. And this is something they do, and that's their lifestyle. But yeah, I just couldn't do it anymore.
well, I have a bunch of friends that have been doing this for a lot of years, like yourselves, like myself. And when we come to them, I know that in the time they thought they kind of took that approach where they had maybe a wife that could keep care of the kids. Toby Francis has spoke to this. Many very accomplished folks that say that they regret not taking the path that you've taken, and coming back to it later, where maybe they didn't feel like they were able to be the best parents they could be because they chose career first. And I know that's something that it sucks having that as a regret. So it looks like you've chose to not make that a problem for you in your life, and that's probably really wise.
One thing is too is just like we're doing here is the technology of Zoom and FaceTime and all this stuff does help with this being away. It feels like there's more of a connection. And I've known musicians on tour that their wife like sets up the iPad where they normally sit at the dinner table, and they sit there and they have dinner with the family every night. And if the kids are young enough, they almost think that daddy is sitting in his seat where he always is, but it's really just him on an iPad. And,
Yeah.
so
Something that was,
I think that's helpful.
yeah, this was something not available to us coming up in the 80s and 90s. I guess that would make a difference. I have to ask you, somebody who's had the
We always
career.
had we grew up with we grew up with the promise of video phone. Remember, like they kept telling us video.
Yeah,
Just like
yeah,
in
and
Star Trek.
flying cars and all.
Finally,
Yeah,
it was interesting that when the pandemic happened and we were all isolated, finally this technology where you could video call on 10 different platforms to anybody in the world, and it looks great and it sounds great and it works fine. And it was interesting that it happened right when this pandemic happened, that the technology had developed to that stage. I guess it made the surviving the pandemic different than it would have had if it hadn't been available.
yeah. Well, I know a lot of podcasts like this came to life because of that, and the combination of the availability of time that the pandemic presented us, the conjunction of technology coming together, and then us all kind of figuring it out and throwing it together and trying to make a way for us to stay connected. And I can imagine that that's been really beneficial as it relates to touring members of our industry, keeping connection with their families. I hadn't even thought of that aspect of it, but yeah, you're right. It's amazing how fast the technology changes as we go through life, and it catches up to us, and we can avail it, make it as a part of our worlds to keep connection together. I got to ask you about, somebody who's had the length and the breadth of a career that you've had. You've got to have some advice for young people on how to be successful in this career. What would you tell a young person to come up to you and say, give me some tips on, how to make it in the live touring production industry?
Okay. I think the first rule that I think of is it's not your show.
Yeah.
Whether you're mixing sound or you're designing a light show, it's not your show. It's the band show. It's the artist show. That's the first thing I try to think about.
Yeah,
It's not my show. It's theirs.
That's very good point.
And then I think for me that I've worked with a crew that has been together for 20 years, the same group of people for the most part, is that you think about your position in it, that you think about what is my role. Am I I'm in charge of the bass, I'm in charge of the drums, I'm in charge of monitors, and you make sure your part is great and then stay out of everybody else's part, you know. And then living on tour, living on a bus is like, it's like living in I never did this myself, but it's like living in an apartment with 8 roommates or 11 roommates. How can you live with one fridge with 11 other people and one tiny little bathroom with 11 other people? So it's about respecting other people's space, understanding your own space. And if you're the guy that I live in New York, so I use this reference, but if you're the person that takes one step down the stairs of the subway and then decides to start texting, and you're holding up 20 people behind you, good. You're not going to make it on. Yeah, you need to know what is, and make sure it doesn't interfere with everyone else's space. And then just get on and do a great job. And if someone bothers you or someone doesn't like you, it doesn't matter. You just do your job and try to be the best at it and try to always learn and get better.
Excellent advice. Words to live by, particularly that knowing how to act in the subway lineup. But yeah, you're not wrong. The transit, bus living, I think it always comes down to the words, how to be a good hang, You could be great at your job, but if you can't be somebody that's a good hang, it's not probably going to pan out so well for you. Yeah. My friend, What's next for you? Where can we see you next? How are we going to get to come out and see you do some beautiful light work?
Oh, God. I can't even think of what's coming up. I'm on holiday here. But, I'll always be out there. I do have some kind of interesting new, I've got a Surfer Rosa anniversary show that's coming up that's going to Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Japan later in the year. I've got a lot of more like creative art installations that are happening in New York. I don't know, always staying busy. I don't know. I'm out there working on it.
So you're still gonna have some relationship with the Pixies, or I thought maybe you had kind of.
Yeah, sure. Yep. Still designing shows for them, and more like they're out on this really long, like 22-week run all summer, and doing like just not a specific design show. They're doing like festivals and radio shows and one-off stuff like that. So it just wasn't something that was to go out on. But in the future, hopefully I'll be still designing and programming their shows and sending apps out. And then when they do real specialty shows like this one, this anniversary show, I'll be doing those that are just shorter runs. So I can tolerate being away from my daughter for a couple of weeks here and there. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure a Surfer's anniversary tour will bring the Pixie fans out of the woodwork. I mean, I know that is one of their cult albums, their classics. That should be a lot of fun. My friend, I cannot thank you enough for coming and sharing your time with us. I know that we had some little technical hiccups. We got past them. Thank you for being patient, staying there, hanging in there with us. It was absolutely a treat. Thank you for sharing your experiences with my audience and being so kind with your time. I appreciate you very much. You take care of yourself.
Thanks for having me.
All right, pal.
Be in touch.
Bye-bye. I always love to learn about the lighting world, my friends. I'm interested in why people do what they do and how we get into the things we get into. That young man's been touring with one of the coolest bands in rock and roll for 30 years, and what a treat. You guys, like I said, I'm sitting here, got a fever, not feeling my best, sweating, dripping all that kind of good stuff. I hope you guys enjoyed the show this evening. Thanks for turning in with us. We're going to have Sean Quackenbush next week. He's an amazing front of house guy. He's out currently with Brandy Carlisle. He's mixed some of the biggest bands in rock and roll. We'll be back next Thursday. Hopefully I'll be in good stead by then, be feeling better. We appreciate all of you guys. You go out there and behave, be good, be kind to each other. Have a good night.